Hello, I'm Kai Rosga, and welcome to Version Up, one lawyer's journey to digitally transform his legal practice. Welcome to Version Up. Today, I talked to Matt Pollins, a former BigLaw partner turned LegalTech founder. Matt spent many years practicing tech law before transitioning to building legal tech products. Matt and I talk lawyer to lawyer about the practical implications of agentic AI on the practice of law and the business of law. We also explore what it means in the market for legal software that lawyers, law firms, and corporate legal departments are increasingly looking at ways to build more of their solutions internally. Matt is a cutting-edge thinker on legal tech, and I was grateful to sit down and chat with him. I hope you enjoy it. Matt Pollins, welcome to Version Up.
Thanks, Kai. Great to be here.
I'm really excited to talk with you today. You're another LinkedIn find in what is a growing community of people thinking about deploying legal tech and supporting lawyers in their legal practice with technology. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, excited to have this conversation.
Can we start by just having you introduce yourself and what you do and how you got into legal tech?
Absolutely. So I am a law firm partner turned legal tech co-founder. So I started my career in BigLaw. I was a tech, media, and telecoms attorney. Spent about half my career in the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent. And the other half, I was out in Singapore and working with clients from startups to some of the tech and media companies. And about 5 years ago, got involved in a project at the firm that I was at, which was looking at the topic of collaboration on legal matters, the way attorneys work together, the way they work with their clients. And that project ultimately became the seed for what became Loople, which is the company that I'm at now. And my current job is I'm Chief Product Officer at Loople. So I help build the roadmap for our platform and manage the team to deliver that for our customers.
And what kind of products or services does Loople provide?
So Loople is at its simplest, it's a task and project management platform. And the problem we solve is that law is a $1 trillion industry that is still largely managed out of email threads, word tables. I know, Kai, you work on M&A transactions, so you'll have seen a fair few of those word trackers. And then if we're feeling really advanced, maybe an Excel tracker. And so what we do at Loople is we take work out of those manual trackers and we put it into a real-time collaborative system where everybody can see who's doing what needs to happen next on my deal, my case, my project.
So calendar and collaboration, does that sum it up?
Yeah. So one way to think of it is like, if you look at other industries, so engineering has Jira, marketing teams use things like Asana or Monday.com. If you're in IT support, you probably use a ServiceNow. But in legal, we have word tables and Excel trackers. And so we're the Jira for legal, or the Monday for legal, or the Asana for legal, if that makes sense. And really helping everybody see, okay, what are our deliverables on this transaction or this project? When are they due? And then increasingly starting to automate that, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But as firms and legal departments start to automate more work, we're shifting from just managing the tasks to actually helping to automate and orchestrate those tasks.
I see. Yeah. Where does management fit into this? Would that be something that plugs into your offering or something that you're building out as part of Loople's product?
It's a great question. And it's one of those terms, actually, matter management, isn't it? Where you can have 3 different conversations with 3 different people and it means 3 different things. You know, there's matter management in the context of corporate legal teams like yours, but those are somewhat different, as you'll know, to what a large law firm might call matter management. And there's also a US-Europe divide on what matter management means. So I've noticed that in the US, often it means more like billing systems, whereas in Europe, law firms don't actually have matter management systems. So it's a term we've struggled with. I'd love to say yes, it's matter management, but the risk is it means three different things. But at its core, yes, it's about managing matters. It's about seeing, okay, here on our M&A transaction, here are the transaction structuring work stream tasks. Here are the negotiation tasks. Here's the local council work stream where we're gathering inputs from multiple local council on merger conditions. And here's the post-closing stuff. Just as one example, also we work with litigation as well.
That makes sense. And sorry, I didn't mean to get political with that question, but I asked because one of the first things that I've implemented on the technology side in the last year or year and a half, as I started my journey to make my practice more tech forward, was actually something I would call matter management, which is something that allows tracking the work that we do more methodically. I would love to add intake to that. I think that would be the next step for us. But the piece of the puzzle that I continue to be on the lookout for is the collaboration side. In particular, collaboration between me as a client, as an in-house lawyer, and external counsel. I don't know if that's something that is in your product roadmap, but I think that the area of collaboration is a really interesting one to explore. Both
100%.
Collaboration that happens internally, but also collaboration, because maybe others in the audience don't appreciate this, but on large investigations, large litigation, large transactions, large M&A, the amount of collaboration and back and forth between external counsel and internal counsel at a corporate like mine is extensive and quite integrated. It's not like always clear when you're handing off a task to someone else. And so in my view, huge opportunity, huge white space for solutions that really eliminate those frictions of collaborating between two separate organizations with their own security systems, et cetera.
100%. And it's funny you mention that because actually, when we launched Loophole 5 years ago, our initial focus was exclusively as being the shared desk between a legal department and its outside counsel. And so from an architecture perspective, we built it with that use case as the use case. And we actually struggled a little bit in the early days. It can be difficult with any business to build a two-sided platform. And you risk sort of spreading yourselves too thin, and the needs of one side are different to the needs of the other. And we also found that the law firms were a little bit reluctant to bring their clients in until they had first used it on a volume of matters internally. So 5 years ago, that was almost the exclusive focus for us. And then we've lent in a little bit more to the law firm side. But it's really interesting, isn't it? Like just in the last 6 months, we've seen the Legora portal, we've seen Harvey Shared Spaces. The guys at InfoDash are doing some great work around things like extranets. And suddenly it feels like there's a recognition that we can't have these beautifully automated and streamlined processes, and then everything falls back to email. And I think you're right. It's a massive opportunity in white space. And law firms, I think, can differentiate by making it easier for clients to engage them. Like reducing that friction of having to send an email and then wait a day for a response. If it could be more seamless through systems like these, then I think that's a differentiator for firms and obviously a great result for clients as well.
I agree. There are a lot of barriers, I think, to getting to that sort of seamless state. And to me, it's one of those lessons of the technology space that I've picked up. It's like the Netflix example of wanting to build a streaming business, but technology wasn't there yet. And so they started with a much more analog version of distributing movies. I find the same thing when I think about legal tech, where sometimes there's a very clear idea of what should be the ideal end state. We could almost all imagine sitting down and agreeing as lawyers, this would be amazing. But because of limitations of the technology or business models or other practical real world obstacles, you have to realize that you're going to have to get there with incremental progress as opposed to just making a big giant leap.
And it's a difficult problem to solve. And part of it as well is the systems are different on each side. So as you'll know, on the corporate legal side, there are folks, living in Slack, living in the Google suite, and in the law firm side, very few. I'm aware of a couple of law firms in the US who use Slack, but it's very much the exception rather than the rule. Co-authoring of documents just doesn't happen generally in big law. So there's kind of a technical bridge. But I think with some of the technologies that have emerged over the last year or two, and MCP and a move towards more kind of API driven, we're seeing opportunities at Loophole, and I know others are as well, where actually the client could potentially still live in Slack and the law firm could potentially still live in the Microsoft suite, and a system can play a role in the middle to connect those two things up. So I think there's an opportunity there. The other thing that we've learned, for what it's worth, is in the early days, we spoke with a lot of corporate law firms, and our corporate legal departments, and Kai, I'd be interested in your view as well, but we spoke with them about this idea of portals. And one of the things we heard from the legal department side was, I didn't actually work with just one law firm. And so if there was one portal where I could manage all my law firms, fantastic. But if you're saying to me that each of my 8 panel firms each have a separate portal that I have to log into, I'm not going to remember the password. I'm not going to remember to log into 8 different systems. I just want it all in one place. So I think a system probably needs to solve for that as well, rather than just being 8 different white labeled versions of the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great point. It suggests some sort of consolidation to a standard, or maybe through, open API sort of development. Maybe it's possible for someone to create a single platform that can work for everyone. But certainly a barrier in-house is the challenges of just keeping up with all your logins. I think the other one is lawyers learning a new user interface. That already is a barrier. It's already an obstacle to successful deployment of a technological solution in-house. Getting people comfortable with one kind of user interface and then having them learn another one. There's a sort of inherent incumbent bias towards the productivity suites because, for example, I'm on Microsoft Office. My employer, we're on the Microsoft suite. Others might be on the Google suite, et cetera. And so the ease of just using SharePoint and people's familiarity with using SharePoint is just a huge leg up versus, for example, onboarding something new. But I think if you identify a problem set that's big enough, there's always the opportunity to wedge in there, especially if you have the interoperability, for example, with Microsoft or with Google.
100%. And I also think you're right. It's about trying to meet people where they are as much as possible. So let's talk about email. Let's talk about Outlook. Like, the number one tool in legal tech is Outlook, and maybe 2 is Word. You could switch those two things around, but those are the most used solutions by attorneys. And I actually don't think that that's going to change. And I'm saying that as a legal tech vendor. I think that the first app that people open each morning is going to remain Outlook or Gmail if you're in the Google suite. I think email remains the center of work for the foreseeable future, because despite its limitations, we'll love to hate it, it's instantly interoperable. I can send an email to anybody on the planet and have confidence that they're going to receive it. And it's that ultimate fallback communication channel where even if it's a notification ping from a platform, you can do push notifications, you can send SMSs, but the one that you just know everybody's going to get is the email. And I just don't think that's going to change. Even in a world where we're working with Agentic teammates, I almost think that email ends up being the human API that connects technology with humans. And I'm just not sure that that's going to change in the foreseeable future. Sure, one day, of course, but not right now.
I think a very sobering but practical real world reminder.
In-house counsel once said to me, I've spent most of my adult life in Microsoft Outlook, which was like super sobering. But then we kind of looked at the numbers and we're like, well, you've been in business for 30 years and you log in at 9 o'clock in the morning, you spend this much of your day. And we're like, it's actually not far off being most of your, or a majority of your adult life, you've had Outlook open.
It's so sticky that if you were to look over the shoulders of a lawyer working, you'd be shocked how much people are taking notes in Outlook. They're drafting memos in Outlook and then later putting them into something else. So it's almost like Outlook is Word and Word is Outlook. It really is a powerful landing page for everyone.
Agreed. And I think the legal tech vendors have become wise to that. We, for example, have built an Outlook integration. A lot of the vendors, the Harveys and the Lagoras, have built those Word plugins, which have been unbelievably successful for these exact reasons, that it's about meeting the users where they are. It's one less app to have to open every day.
Yeah, I totally agree. You mentioned agentic AI. I would love to get your perspective on what that phrase means. It's something that I have personally struggled with. It's something that I feel like has been evolving. So what does it mean to you? How do you think about it? And what does it mean for day-to-day legal practice for lawyers?
Yeah, you're right. It does feel like a term that's been hyped and marketed probably for the last 12 months or so. It feels like it's really been the term that everybody's focused on. My definition, for what it's worth, is that I think agents, what differentiates them from assistants or chatbots is agents are more systems of action. They do things. And so, whereas an assistant, you can ask it a question. What does this contract say about change of control? And it generates in text and it answers your question. An agent can actually do things. And at a more practical level, I think, when I think of an agent, it's sort of got 3 or 4 moving parts. It's got an identity. So you are a merger control expert, and it has a set of tooling. And again, this is because it's systems of action, but tooling, it can interact with your document management system to pull documents or to put documents into that system. It can pull time data from your matter management system or budget data from your matter management system. It can create tasks, deadlines in a system like Loople, or trigger workflows. So it's an identity, it's some tooling, and then it's increasingly some knowledge as well. And you've probably been following Kai feels like the last couple of weeks, Claude Code has really hit the mainstream as an example of something that is truly an agent. And one of the features of that is it has this thing called skills, which sounds fancy, but really they're just text files that tell an agent how to do certain things. So here's how to undertake a change of control review on a contract. Here's what to look for on an NDA when you're reviewing it. You remember the old days from practice of practice notes and practical guidance and things like that, which tell an attorney how to perform certain categories of legal work. Agents can have that as well. So I think of it as being a system of action that has those 3 or 4 components to it.
Let me run this by you. So just thinking out loud here, the chatbot is like the librarian and the agent is more of an actor. Is that a fair framing? Because the chain of thought that leads me on is this might help me understand why my observation among lawyers is the transition to using a chatbot seems a little more intuitive to people. I think maybe the reason for that is because they're used to searching things on Google. And now instead of searching things on Google, they ask a chatbot and they get an answer. But both of those are being seen or used as a resource, like a librarian almost, right? Someone to help you find information. Whereas this notion of agentic AI feels to me like a big leap for the average user to take, because it's not like Google. It frankly isn't like anything in people's current arsenal of technology they use. If anything, the closest thing to compare it to is a junior attorney or a paralegal. And how do you take the lessons learned of working with an associate and translate that into using agentic AI? That already feels like a big leap to me. Whereas the leap from Google to using a chatbot feels more intuitive. Does that land with you, or this is a working theory?
No, I like it. I think there's a lot of truth in it. And I think you're bang on in terms of it's been easy to adopt assistant tools where you ask a question and get an answer, because it's like a better version of Google. Now, obviously, no lawyer ever has used Google on a legal matter ever. I think we've got to say, but no, it's that was an easier transition. Where I think that it's more a case of evolution is, let's take an interaction that you're having with a chatbot where you ask it to, I know you're kind of in the M&A space, to, I don't know, prepare a draft. I never practiced in this field, by the way, Kai, so apologies, I'm going to butcher this, but a draft memo on something based on some inputs, or summarize a memo, and it gives it back to you in the chat. Now, where I see a transition towards Agentic is when you then say to it, okay, great, now please export that as a docx file. And then you say, and put it in my Fernhouse style and apply this logo to the document. Or suddenly it's actually using some tooling there. It's using Python or something like that to generate a docx. And to me, then that's slightly more than just an interaction where you're asking it a question and getting an answer in text. And to me, it's only then a couple of steps from there to update the matter in my matter management system, or save the file for me, would you please, to my matter management system, and notify my boss that she needs to review it. I agree with you in terms of the story so far, and I don't think we're going to see a full agentic end-to-end workflows for the time being. But I can see lawyers starting to take those baby steps into more agentic workflows.
So in taking those baby steps, who's going to be holding my hand? Is it going to be third-party vendors? Is it going to be my legal operations person internally? Is it going to be some other internal technologists, maybe at a law firm? I see these terms like AI, what do they call them? Service lawyers, things like that. I imagine we're not at a state anywhere anytime soon when the average lawyer is going to be creating their own agents, maybe sometime, but maybe not now. So in that meantime, who's helping me deploy these agentic AI solutions?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a couple of things that are happening, and they'll sort of meet in the middle. So I'm seeing a lot of vibe coding on LinkedIn. Certainly here in the UK, I can't remember which dictionary it was, but the word of the year in the UK was vibe coding last year, not just in legal tech, but here in the UK. And I'm seeing a lot of attorneys starting to spin up solutions themselves. Now, I think there's also an acknowledgement that those solutions generally are not yet ready for a production deployment. You know, you're not going to roll that out across the firm. Though there have been one or two examples of lawyers. I think there was one at Linklaters a week or two back that she vibe coded a solution over a weekend. It then went through her firm's technology department, who QA'd it, and more than QA'd it, got it ready for production release. But now it's been deployed across the firm. And so I think there's a bit of that happening, but we're very early and we're very much early adopters. And that last mile from, hey, here's a vibe coded prototype, to here's an agent, or here's an app that I can roll out across my organization, it's a lot more than a mile. I think there's, a recognition of that as well. But nonetheless, to your question, I think there are those early adopters who are naturally curious and starting to play around with these tools themselves. So that's kind of like one end of the spectrum. And then there are those who are going to need to be led into this a little bit more. And what I'm noticing is vendors increasingly, like, services are back in fashion a little bit. Sure. So there was a while where, in Silicon Valley and VCs, and, you sold software or SaaS, you didn't sell services. But actually increasingly, some of the big legal tech companies, whether they call it forward deployed engineer, that's, the new term, or whether it's customer success or something in between those two things, they're playing a really important role. And then, in corporate legal, I sometimes think you guys are ahead of the game with legal ops. And I think it's super interesting that Mary O'Carroll, who used to lead Clock, went from in-house at Google via Ironclad to being, I think, COO at Goodwin. And that's a recognition of how, in some ways, corporate legal departments from the legal ops perspective had moved slightly ahead of of law firms. So I think it's a combination of those early adopters who will just naturally start to find their way in this space, and then those who will be led. And I think the vendors are playing a role, of course, alongside the KM and innovation teams, which are getting bigger in law firms.
Really astute observation, because as I meet with and talk to legal tech founders such as yourself, I come in with a bias expecting them to have a product that they put out in the world, like an app, like the kind of app I download on my iPhone. And increasingly, the conversations I end up having have me walking away asking myself, so is this a legal tech like product, or is this like a consultant? Is this someone who's actually developing custom workflows on a one-by-one basis? Sometimes that leads to a scalable product, but often it sounds like it's really more of an advisory consultancy kind of relationship. And I didn't know what to make of that observation, but you're helping me understand that this is actually a trend that's happening because of the changes in the technology.
I think that's right. And it's also, so I mean, I'll take what we're doing at Loople just as an example for a moment. I mentioned before, we're increasingly helping law firms in particular to automate processes. And you and I were having a discussion just now about getting people to change how they work. It isn't easy in any industry, and including in law. I think what's changed now is a recognition that things are shifting from you don't need to change how you work to you actually do need to change how you work for some stuff. Delivery of certain legal matters is going to become more productized. And so for us, just as a practical example, we'll go into a law firm and we do these sprints. So we do like a 1-day sprint or a 5-day sprint. We'll go in and we'll sit with their practice group. Let's say it's the funds department. And we'll say to them, like, how do you do a fund setup today? And it's amazing, actually, it's all in the partner's head, but they've never put it down on a whiteboard, like in the form of a flow chart. So we'll sit with them, we'll lay it out, and then we'll say, gosh, that's quite manual, isn't it? You know, you send the client a Word document to populate with a questionnaire, they send it back to you, you then manually take that information and create a bunch of fund documents from that. Wouldn't it be cool if we could automate that? So you're right. It's like we're at that stage, we are consulting and we're adding value in that perspective, from that perspective. And then the software is in addition to that. And I know that a lot of the AI vendors as well have literally placed, these legal engineers or whatever you want to call them directly with their clients to provide those services. So I do see the future actually as being software plus services, interestingly.
What does third-party developed legal software look like in 1 to 2 years if we continue on this path? What sort of problem sets are the vendors focusing on? Or is it more about the fact that they're packaging things into a really nice, cohesive, all-in-one solution? Is it because they're really good at creating an excellent user interface that is based on experience working with a lot of different clients or building these tools? What is the unique space on the software side, not the consultancy side, but the software side that a vendor fills, do you think?
Yeah, I think you've got to be opinionated as a vendor. So you can't just be, here's one way of managing a matter. It's got to be, this is our way. This is what we have seen from all of the interactions we've had with law firms and corporate legal departments of what works. And that's baked into the software. And you see this in other industries. Like a good example is a system called Linear, which is used by a lot of software engineers. And it's highly opinionated in the way that software engineering can be managed and delivered. It's the way its workflows are set up. It fits like a glove. And so I think having an opinion on the way things should be done is a big part of it. I think also being open from the perspective of whether it's APIs or whether you're leveraging protocols like MCP, which is the sort of universal adapter for AI and agents. Being able to, 5 years ago, you could maybe get away with not having an answer on whether you can integrate with the client's own systems. I think that is, that's not going to fly anymore. You've got to be able to integrate with all the systems that the firm or the legal department is using. So I think those are probably the big things, but I do think it's all wrapped up as well in this expertise, and you might call it consulting or expertise in how you might deliver or use that piece of software in the organization.
I love that word, opinionated. That's such a great way of putting it. And it implies that you have to have a level of security in yourself and in what you're offering. It makes me think of the Steve Jobs approach to device design. It's not a pull everyone, pick the most common denominator, and then develop it that way. I believe that there's a certain way that people will benefit from having a device look and feel and operate. And I'm going to put it out in the world, and I'm going to essentially create a product that hasn't been out there before. I think that's a really interesting take. And to me, it also helps crystallize how to distinguish what I'm going to call a legal tech vendor, for lack of a better word, versus a like PwC consultant, which will come in and help you develop bespoke solutions, but probably not as focused on productizing everything to the outside world.
Yeah. And I think that the vendors are uniquely well placed in that they work with you and also a bunch of other, whether it's law firms or legal departments, oftentimes over a number of years to see what works and what doesn't. And it's a bit like when, one of the reasons that you might engage outside counsel is because they have that perspective perhaps across the industry of how things are done and practices and those kind of things. So that's where I think the vendors can add value. I do think we will see firms and even legal departments developing some of their own solutions too, just to be clear. I do think that there will be some in-house development building on this vibe coding trend. I have a terrible habit of buying domain names without a real idea of what to do with them. So agents.law was one that I bought last year.
That sounds like a profitable habit.
Well, I would imply that I can sell them or do something valuable with them. But I bought last week, my friend of mine and I went halves on vibecode.law. So if anyone listening has ideas for what we should be doing with vibecode.law, or you want to buy it off me for $90, which would be a $10 profit, I'm all ears.
I love that. So let me run by you just some notes I've been taking, kind of framing this out for myself. How is this legal tech landscape going to settle? How is this all going to shake out, given how much fast change we have? So we've got a lawyer that just uses a chatbot. That's on one end of the spectrum, is me using Copilot. Then we have a vibe code lawyer, someone who's the tinkerer. Some of that might get out into the wild within their organization. You gave a great example from Linklaters, which I did see that. I thought that was really interesting. Moving along in the spectrum, I then have legal ops / practice innovation people who develop bespoke tools within an organization. They're not trying to sell them to the external world necessarily, whether it's a law firm, whether it's in-house, someone that's more a technology project manager who is looking across the organization. What are our needs? Okay, here's some common needs. Let's build this out. Then we have the consultants and advisors. You made a great point. Law firms are filling this role as well. I've seen this. Consultants and advisors who are really providing advisory on sort of one-off solutions, let's say. Then we have vendors who are building software that scales across use cases, across organizations. What am I missing? Are there other kind of players we should be thinking about that are going to be really at the forefront of deploying technology and developing it?
I think you covered all the key players and the roles that they're playing. I think maybe the piece we didn't touch on yet is the productization of the legal services themselves. And that might mean literally a product, like a piece of software, which is usually what people mean when they talk about a product. But in my mind, there's also this growing trend of the productization of legal services generally. And that might include technology, but part of it's also setting a scope and setting a budget, a fee, and setting some SLAs and agreeing some outcomes for that product. So I'm not sure where that sits on the landscape. I suppose it's at its core, it's the partners of the law firm, the business leaders of the law firm, thinking about how they productize, or whether and how they productize some of the services that they're providing today.
Yeah, it's an artificial spectrum. I don't mean to imply that there's too much science behind it, but it helps me to sort of think through what the different roles would be. I guess one thing that is in the background is the LLMs themselves. There's this open question of what is OpenAI going to do to go into a legal vertical, for example? What is Microsoft going to do to be more of a provider of tools specific to the legal sector? And add to that, I guess, the layer of Claude Code and what are these LLMs going to do to empower the lawyers to really do this themselves? That seems to me like a big open question as well, because obviously those companies have massive resources. They have a huge incumbency advantage. They have all these advantages that they could leverage, but also they have a different business model. So who knows, ultimately where they want to invest their capital.
Yeah, I think that's right. And in my mind, AI, we're probably close to the point already where AI alone isn't the differentiator. It's starting to become a commodity. I mean, it's hard to keep up with all the model updates and announcements. Right now, maybe you're an Opus fan or a Gemini fan or a OpenAI fan. It changes. I think we all sort of switch around every few weeks with these new model releases. But I do think we're getting close to the point where to me, AI almost becomes like cloud, in the sense that it's a commoditized technology, and you can get it from AWS, you can get it from Google, you can get it from Microsoft. And yes, there are advantages and disadvantages depending on your use case for each one of those things. But I think that it starts to become a commodity, and it's what you do with it that I think will be the differentiator. So to your question, will we see OpenAI or Claude aggressively target the legal vertical? Personally, I don't see it. Maybe sort of B2C stuff, I'm not sure. But I think the real value that we're going to see with AI is not so much, hey, we use AI or we use Legora or we use Harvey. I think you don't win. Firms, for example, are not going to win or lose work because of which AI solution they use. They're going to win or lose work based on outcomes and how they use those technologies to deliver those outcomes for their clients. I think that's where we're probably going to end up, and it'll be agnostic as to which AI you use underneath it.
Yeah, it may be impossible to predict all these different components, maybe artificial to create the spectrum. But for me, one takeaway from thinking of it that way is that if you see anyone taking too strong of a position, for example, on LinkedIn, about, okay, law firms are done, or legal tech vendors are just wrappers, they're done. There's this constant swinging online, I feel like, in the discourse that tries to always predict the demise of one or two or three of these players. I imagine we're going to have all of these different components of the legal tech space for the foreseeable future.
100%. And that also, I think that's partly the LinkedIn algorithm rewarding people posting things that, generate comments. But yeah, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times, depending on what day of the week it is and who's released which model. Evolution is what I see coming. So again, I'll speak for what I see in law firms. I think they're going to evolve to being, I call it the multi-channel law firm, where I think there will continue to be the bespoke work which they provide to their clients today, which is largely billable hour based. And then I think there'll be a growing product. There already is a growing productized track, which is a more fixed scope, outcome driven business. And some firms will lean in more to one than the other. The productized track, some firms won't want to go after it at all. But I don't think we're going to see the demise of law firms. I don't think we're going to see the demise of any legal work being outsourced. And I don't think that legal tech vendors are going to be vibe coded out of existence. As always, the truth is somewhere between all of these things.
You have practiced law for a pretty significant period of time. And now lawyers are your clients. So you know all about how lawyers do their day-to-day work and how technology fits into it. Do you agree with the following statement? There's still a huge gap between the state of art in legal tech versus what day-to-day is actually being used and implemented by lawyers. And what I mean by that is, despite all the great publicity and all the attention around things like AI, lawyers still mostly do their jobs the same way they did 5 years ago. And that includes lawyers at premium law firms and includes lawyers at, global 500 companies. Do you see that gap, or do you think it's quickly maybe bridging in a way that I don't see because I'm not out there selling products, for example, to lawyers day to day?
I think that broadly you're right, but we've made incredible progress in the last 12 months. We being the industry as a whole. I think that the AI tools are being really well adopted. And I think you're also right that right now it's mostly being used for search. I think that, the key use cases of most of the AI tools is assistant queries and then tabular review, and you dump 10,000 documents into a tool and it outputs a table. Those are the two use cases. We're seeing a lot of value there. So that's new and that's progress. But were you to compare it to an industry like engineering,
Right.
which I see as being perhaps the best tool we have for looking into the future. I don't know how far into the future, but looking into the future, we're a little bit behind there. But there has been incredible progress in a year. So I'm quite bullish about for obvious reasons, I suppose, but I'm quite bullish about the progress we've made in the last 12 months and the progress we'll make in the next 12.
Yeah, I guess there was a unspoken assumption or premise in my question, which was there's a distinction to me between what's happening in the background at a law firm or at a corporate legal department versus what the lawyer sees and experiences. And I get the sense that the lawyer's experience has been basically chatbots and maybe Harvey, Legora, some additional kind of features in there. But certainly there's a lot more happening in the background, right? The legal ops department, the people who are supporting the lawyers in an operational way certainly are adopting this stuff way faster. But in terms of just talking to lawyers day to day, I guess I was thinking, I'm always surprised how their day-to-day job has not changed that much in terms of their interaction with technology. It's sort of still Microsoft Word. It's still Outlook. It's still Westlaw Nexus, a little bit of Google. That jumps out at me. And I always like to ask people in the industry what might explain that. Maybe it's the time lag. Maybe we'll be there sooner than we realize. Maybe I spent too much time on LinkedIn where the future is here.
There is that risk, isn't there, that some of us are in a bit of a bubble. And, I'm talking about lawyers vibe coding solutions, and that, probably feels a long way off for some people. What I think, to go to your point about, how might we bridge that gap? I think the key skill that we should all try and work on is curiosity. And I just think something that I try to do every time there's a new model release or API release, whatever, is I personally will try and build something with it. I'm not a software engineer by background, but I'll try and roll up my sleeves and get into it. And I think we're going to see that more from lawyers as well. I think that there's a growing confidence that tech isn't something that is almost done to you, which I think perhaps has been the case in the past. Like, you will use this document management system. If you save it to your desktop, you'll get a call from IT. I think it's shifting towards, wow, tech is something that I can do something with. And if I have no clue where to begin with Claude Code, I can ask Claude Code where I should begin, or ask ChatGPT, how do I work with your API? And I think it's the start of something there, with lawyers starting to become more confident. And in my mind, we all just need to be a lot more full stack, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a graphic designer, a software engineer, or a consultant. You need to, I think the careers of those who are successful, the careers of the future will be more T-shaped, able to do a lot of things, and go deep on perhaps one thing. And Yeah. So back to your question, I think that it's that curiosity that could perhaps start to close the gap as we all roll up our sleeves and test the limits of these tools.
Completely agree on the curiosity piece. I try to remain self-aware that I might be a bit of a biased sample in that regard, but lawyers are, smart people by and large, they're hardworking people and they operate in a market. And so what that means is as early adopters take on this sort of full stack thinking and approach and see results, the rest will be not too far behind. And so even if I don't have a good idea of what causes that transition, I do feel pretty confident in saying, once it happens, it will be like a tidal wave. It will just click and all of a sudden it'll become baseline to have these abilities and to have these tools.
Agreed. It's exciting.
Matt, before we wrap here, I saw on LinkedIn, you have a podcast coming out. Can you tell us about your plans with that?
Thank you for helping me plug my podcast, Kai. Yeah, I've decided to launch a podcast in 2026. It's called Without Limitation. I went through all the possible puns around legal terminology that I could, and Without Limitation is what I landed on. And yeah, the goal is just...
Did you get the domain?
I haven't. And you know what? Now someone's going to buy it, aren't they? So I better, that's another $80 you've cost me there.
We're not live streaming. We're not live streaming. You have some lead time here.
Yeah, no, Without Limitation. And yeah, the goal is just to speak to people who are far smarter than me, who are pushing the boundaries of legal. And, I really think we are at the start of almost like this industrial revolution of knowledge work. And I'm just really excited to speak to some smart people and hear what they have to say about it, really.
Love that. We look forward to seeing it. I'm sure you have an excellent network that you're going to be able to tap into. My favorite episodes are driven by, the people I get to talk to and just really leveraging all the expertise and knowledge that people like you have. And I'm grateful to it. It's a hobby. It's part networking, part self-professional development, but also, hopefully providing some perspective to the audience that they can find valuable as well. So can't wait to see what you have in store.
And Kai, I got to get you on and we'll do a crossover episode, and I'm going to switch we'll switch the roles and I'm going to ask you some stuff.
Happy to. I think it's hard to get practitioners on the line and get their time because they're often, overworked and all that. So I would be more than happy to provide the perspective of someone who's not really a technologist, but someone who thinks about this and how it impacts his day-to-day legal practice.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Kai.